Different section of the border, a place where Americans and Mexicans have come together for years while remaining within their respective countries, could soon be no more.
To Mexicali, causing both sides of the border to be closed.
The video opens with breaking news urgency. Armed federal agents sealing off the California border in the dead of night. Searchlights cut through dust as officials in hazmat suits emerge from a gaping hole in the desert. The narrator hints at an impossible structure uncovered deep underground, older than recorded history. Before asking the audience, why did the government shut it down? And what are they hiding from us? The wind was already sharp that evening, the kind that carried dust in low, stinging swirls across the flat, empty miles of the California-Mexico border. Out here, where the land folds into the jagged edges of the Jacamba Mountains, the horizon usually stayed quiet, truck lights crawling in the distance, the occasional hum of a patrol vehicle, and the slow, steady rhythm of life on both sides of the line. But on this particular night, that rhythm broke. It started with a single helicopter, its searchlight combing the desert floor like a slow-moving eye. Then came another and another, until the sky throbbed with rotor blades. Just past 8:47 p.m. Drivers on Interstate 8 reported seeing a sudden convoy of unmarked black SUVs barreling westward toward the border. Minutes later, both the Otay Mesa and Tech 8 crossings went dark, not just closed, but blacked out. The usual floodlights along the perimeter flickered once and died, replaced by the unnerving glow of portable flood lamps that painted the ground in harsh surgical white. One trucker, who'd been waiting to clear customs, said the agents didn't explain a thing. They just told us to turn around, he recalled later, voice tight. It said the crossing was done for the night. No reason given, no warning. In the nearby hills described watching a wall of dust rise in the distance as military transports rolled in from the east. It was like something out of a movie, said one, leaning on his fence post the next morning. They weren't just moving quick, they were moving like they didn't want anyone to see what was going on. But of course, people did see. A local delivery driver managed to snap 3 photos on his phone before 2 uniformed men approached, told him he was inside a restricted zone, and demanded he hand it over. They erased them right there. In front of me, he said. Then they handed my phone back like nothing happened. Similar stories popped up across social media brief. Shaky clips of floodlights and figures in hazmat suits before vanishing as accounts went dark or posts were deleted, somewhere between the radio silence and the road closures. A thin line of tension began to coil through the border communities. The official statement was vague. Routine infrastructure inspection. Public safety precautions. But no one who lived here believed that. Routine inspections didn't involve men in full respirators. It didn't involve the Army sealing. Off a mile-wide stretch of desert by 10:15 p.m., the real rumors began. A rancher who grazed cattle within sight of the wall claimed he saw a deep gash in the earth, something that hadn't been there the day before. It wasn't like a sinkhole, he told a neighbor. It was clean, like it was cut. Another man swore he heard machinery running somewhere beneath the ground, a steady metallic churning that stopped as abruptly as it started. The few lights left burning were fixed on a single area half a mile north of the crossing. Through binoculars, one witness caught what looked like an excavation pit, framed by scaffolding and crawling with figures in reflective suits. Something large was being hoisted up, wrapped tight under black sheeting, its shape impossible to make out in the haze. Just before midnight, the wind shifted, carrying with it a low, strange hum. It was so faint at first that most ignored it, assuming it was another engine, until it deepened into a vibration you could feel through your boots. Border Patrol trucks pulled closer to the pit, engines running but headlights off, their silhouettes sharp against the floodlight glare. Whatever was happening, it was accelerating. A handful of contractors, faces pale in the harsh light, were seen speaking urgently with federal agents at the edge of the site. One of them, a young man in a dust-caked hardit, was overheard muttering something as he stripped off his gloves. His voice was low, almost drowned by the thud of distant machinery, but the words carried just far enough for a nearby worker to catch them. Later, in a hushed call to his brother, that worker repeated what he'd heard. This shouldn't be here. By dawn, the wind had stilled, but the air carried something heavier than dust. The lockdown remained in place, the hum from the night before gone, replaced by a tense, unnatural quiet. For a few hours, the desert seemed to hold its breath. Then, as the sun stretched low over the horizon, a drip of new details began to leak not from official channels, but from those who had been close enough to see what the floodlights had been hiding. One of the first to speak was a subcontractor, his voice jittering over a scrambled phone call. He described a narrow shaft opening in the center of the excavation site, surrounded by steel scaffolding, so fresh the welds were still gleaming. The opening led straight down, not sloping like a mine, but a vertical drop into darkness. Workers had lowered cameras inside, only to find the shaft opened into a sprawling network of tunnels, each wide enough for a small vehicle to pass through. Yet carved with such precision they looked more like hallways than natural formations. It wasn't. Just their shape that made no sense. The depth readings came back wrong, according to the contractor. The first tunnel started at nearly 400 feet below the surface. No known human construction in this region had ever gone that deep without modern drilling equipment. And yet the surfaces of these walls were smooth, almost polished. They were lined with a glassy black rock that locals would later compare to obsidian. Though geologists say natural obsidian veins do not appear in formations like this, certainly not at all, that depth, more unnerving were the markings. Etched into the walls in careful, deliberate lines were symbols no one recognized. They weren't letters in any known language, nor did they match the petroglyphs found in ancient sites across California and the American Southwest. The shapes were sharp, geometric triangles intersecting with arcs, spirals nested within squares, and each symbol seemed to repeat at precise intervals, as if following some code. Some workers claimed the markings shimmered faintly under their headlamps, but others dismissed it as a trick of the light reflecting off the glassy surface. 2. Independent geologists brought in under the guise of a structural assessment were overheard debating the strata in hushed voices. One of them, an older man with decades of experience in tectonic research, apparently insisted the rock layer housing the tunnels was millions of years older than the earliest evidence of human civilization. That meant the tunnels were either impossibly ancient, or something had penetrated the earth far deeper and faster than any natural process could explain. Before the excavation even began, the ground had already been talking. 3 days earlier, the United States Geological Survey had recorded an unusual vibration in the area, not a quake exactly, but a repeating pulse, like the echo of a machine buried deep underground. At first, the signal was faint, barely distinguishable from background seismic noise. But the closer the sensors were moved toward the border, the stronger it became, until the pattern was unmistakable, a steady rhythm. 12 beats, pause, 12 beats again. Then, without warning, it stopped. One of the seismic analysts later told a friend that in all his years studying fault activity, he had never seen a pattern like it. Earth doesn't pulse, not like that. The only things that do are living hearts. Or engines. Despite their orders to remain silent, some crew members couldn't help but talk. A pair of photographs began circulating on encrypted message boards. The first showed a perfectly squared tunnel junction deep underground, the black glassy walls unbroken except for the strange etched patterns. The second, darker and blurrier, appeared to show an opening in the floor of that same junction, a round aperture, ringed with metallic ridges. Like the iris of a camera lens frozen mid-close. Within hours of posting, the images vanished, and the account that uploaded them was deleted. Meanwhile, the infrastructure inspection narrative was starting to collapse under the weight of these whispers. Border residents, already suspicious, from the sudden blackout, began trading stories in back rooms and parking lots. Someone claimed the tunnels extended south into Mexico. Another swore a friend in the Mexican military had been ordered to seal off a corresponding stretch on their side. The cross-border cooperation only deepened the mystery. Whatever this was, it didn't belong to one country. The stakes sharpened when a leak from a federal seismic lab hinted that the structure, if it could even be called that, wasn't stable. Pressure readings inside the tunnels were fluctuating, and temperature sensors showed an intermittent spike in heat deep in the network. Experts feared that if the fluctuation was connected to movement within the structure, it could trigger a collapse. Or worse, something emerging. Late that evening, a recording surfaced briefly on a private channel, before disappearing into the digital ether. The voice was low, almost a whisper, with the muffled background noise of wind and engines. The speaker identified himself only as security detail, Site 6. His words were deliberate, each one weighed before release. "It's not man-made," the voice said, "and it's still active." By the following afternoon, the story had shifted from whispered rumors to an uneasy, fractured public debate. On one side were the scientists' spale, exhausted men and women in wrinkled lab coats, standing at podiums and speaking in clipped, careful language about anomalies in the Earth's strata. On the other, stern-faced military officials in pressed uniforms, eyes hidden behind dark lenses, brushing off questions with vague assurances about public safety and ongoing operations. At a hastily arranged press briefing in San Diego, Dr. Harold Keating, a geophysicist from the University of California, leaned into the microphone, his voice hoarse but steady. "If the measurements are accurate," he said, "we are looking at a structure embedded in rock layers that predate any known human activity by millions of years. Either our understanding of geological timelines is wrong, or this was built by something with capabilities far beyond ours." His words hung in the air for a moment before the questions exploded. "What kind of capabilities? You suggesting extraterrestrial involvement? Is this a threat?" Keating didn't answer directly. He just shook his head slightly and muttered, "That's the problem. We don't know." Military spokespeople, however, weren't entertaining any such speculation. Colonel Mason Dillard of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers stepped up next, stiff-backed and unreadable. "This is an ongoing infrastructure evaluation in a sensitive border zone," he said, each word weighed. "Speculation is dangerous, and the public should not be alarmed. The site has strategic significance, and we will be taking measures to ensure it is secure." That phrase, strategic significance, sent ripples across the room. Two reporters used to decoding military speak. It wasn't far from saying, "We want it before anyone else gets it." Meanwhile, outside the official briefings, other voices were cutting through. A local volunteer with the Red Cross, who had been stationed near the perimeter to provide water to on-site personnel, told a journalist she'd overheard soldiers talking about the sound. "They said it wasn't constant," she recalled, "but when it came, it was like a deep, mechanical breathing. It wasn't just noise, you could feel it in your chest." Thermal imaging taken from a private drone, quickly taken down from social media, showed something else. Inside the black void of one tunnel, a glowing patch of heat seemed to pulse faintly, as if something deep within the rock was radiating energy. Experts couldn't agree whether it was geological activity or something artificial. The military refused to confirm the authenticity of the footage, which only made the online speculation explode further. The presence of the CIA and Department of Homeland Security on site added fuel to the fire. By mid-morning, plainclothes agents had been spotted entering and leaving the excavation area, carrying sealed black cases. One local law enforcement officer, speaking on condition of anonymity, said DHS had taken over command of certain sections of the site from the Army. An unusual move that suggested the find was considered more than a simple engineering or geological matter. As hours passed, the tension between the scientists and the military thickened. Leaked email from a research team begged for more time inside the tunnels before they were sealed. "This is a once-in-human-history opportunity," the message read. "Shutting it down now may mean losing answers we can never recover." In response, internal military memos cited unacceptable operational risks and potential instability in the structure. Neither side trusted the other's motives. By late afternoon, the standoff was bleeding into public view. A small crowd had gathered near the outer perimeter, journalists, conspiracy vloggers, and curious locals craning their necks toward the distant hum of generators. The air buzzed with half-truths and speculation. Some swore the government was hiding an ancient weapon. Others believed it was a crashed craft, buried and forgotten until now. Then, just as the desert light began to turn gold, a sudden commotion broke the monotony. Over the ridge to the east, a line of dark vehicles appeared, heavily armored, moving fast. Dust rose in thick clouds behind them as they roared toward the excavation site. Through binoculars, one could make out mounted antennas. In the glint of reinforced plating, no insignias, no markings. The convoy didn't slow as it hit the checkpoint. Instead, the gates swung open before them as if their arrival had been expected. Within minutes, the vehicles disappeared into the heart of the restricted zone. No one outside knew what they carried, but those watching swore they could feel a subtle shift in the air that comes when something is about to change. By the time the armored convoy disappeared into the excavation site, the public conversation had already fractured into a dozen competing narratives. The official story that this was a routine infrastructure inspection in a sensitive area had been dismissed by nearly everyone outside government circles. In its place, a tangle of theories began to take root, each clashing, overlapping, and mutating in real time across newsrooms, podcasts, and late-night message boards. The first wave of speculation leaned on plausible geology. Some researchers, carefully distancing themselves from the more outlandish claims, suggested the tunnels might be the remnants of prehistoric volcanic chambers. California's geological history was littered with episodes of violent activity: lava, tubes and magma conduits carved into the bedrock long before humans ever walked the continent. It's possible, one volcanologist told a local paper, what they've found is a preserved network, sealed for millions of years, and the markings are simply mineral patterns created under extreme pressure. Others offered a more commercially enticing theory: an undiscovered mineral deposit. The black, glassy walls could indicate a rare obsidian-rich formation, or even a vein of something valuable and unknown. If so, the secrecy might not be about danger, but about keeping prospectors in rival nations away until extraction rights were secured. It was a tidy explanation, but it didn't account for the deep humming, the heat signatures, or the symbols that stubbornly refused to match any natural pattern. Then there was the migration tunnel hypothesis. Anthropologists pointed out that ancient peoples often carved extensive subterranean networks for shelter, transport, or ritual. In theory, an advanced but forgotten culture could have tunneled deep beneath the desert, leaving behind geometric art as a kind of proto-writing. But even the most optimistic proponents admitted the precision of the cuts, and the impossible depth stretched credibility thin. If the rational theories built a cautious scaffold, the fringe theories set it on fire. Across YouTube and encrypted chat rooms, talk of lost civilizations surged. Some claimed the site was evidence of a pre-human culture, wiped out long before recorded history, whose remnants lay sealed in the earth until now. Others jumped further: aliens, not visitors from the stars, but residents of the Earth's hidden layers. It's an idea borrowed from century-old pulp novels and given fresh life by the details. It's trickling out of the site. One retired intelligence officer, speaking under a pseudonym in a popular podcast interview, claimed the tunnels matched schematics from a classified Cold War project. According to him, in the 1960s, the U.S. had experimented with deep Earth bases to house missile silos and command centers, some connected across hundreds of miles. If they've found one of those, he said, it means there's either tech down there that never made it into the public sphere, or something that forced them to abandon it fast. But perhaps the most gripping narrative came from those who tied the discovery to indigenous oral history. Members of the Kumeyaay Nation, whose ancestral lands spanned the border region, spoke of an ancient Storian underworld gateway, guarded by the earth itself. It was said to be a place where the living and the spirits of the underworld could pass between realms, though doing so carried immense risk. In these stories, the door was sealed ages ago, not by man but by the desert itself. For some, the sudden military lockdown felt uncomfortably close to that warning. Fueling all of it was a single, tantalizing piece of footage. Captured by a drone operator before his feed was jammed, the video showed the mouth of a tunnel far below the scaffolding. Inside, Against the blackness, points of light seemed to move slowly, deliberately like fireflies in a cavern. The clip was barely 10 seconds long, but it racked up millions of views before being wiped from most platforms. Officials dismissed it as an optical illusion, the result of dust and headlamps. But those who'd seen the uncompressed version swore the lights moved in patterns too, regular to be random. The clash between experts and conspiracy theorists reached a fever pitch. On one cable news panel, a structural engineer and a paranormal investigator nearly shouted over each other, one insisting the tunnels were a geological curiosity, the other declaring them an active alien base. Even the language fractured. The military called it a subterranean anomaly, scientists a geological irregularity. Conspiracy forums simply called it the door. But in the noise, a new leak slipped through. Scanned document, partially redacted but bearing the seal of the U.S. Geological Survey, began circulating on private channels. It claimed that the structure didn't stop at the border. In fact, it extended nearly 30 miles into Mexican territory. More troubling was the map included in the file. Faint red lines traced the tunnel network and intersected with known fault lines of the San Andreas system. If the document was real, it suggested a discovery far larger and potentially more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Then if the tunnels were connected to an active fault, the consequences of disturbing them might reach far beyond the desert, under the unrelenting desert night. The press tents were silent, their occupants long gone, driven off by a sudden weather advisory that no one quite believed. In the distance, the floodlights around the excavation site cut through the darkness, your cones of pale yellow light trembling slightly in the dry wind. For days, officials had insisted the structure was nothing more than an abandoned cold war bunker. But that illusion shattered when the whistleblower's files dropped. The leak wasn't dramatic at first, just a hidden folder posted to an encrypted forum. The kind of place conspiracy theorists usually haunt. But inside were images that didn't fit into any narrative the public had been fed. Grainy yet undeniable, they showed a colossal slab embedded within the strange subterranean walls. Its edges perfectly smooth, its surface etched with unfamiliar symbols. It wasn't concrete, it wasn't stone. It looked like something forged, then sealed in place, as if it was never meant to be touched. One photo caught it at an angle where the light struck just right, revealing a faint seam running down its center, like the outline of a door. Hours after the leak spread online, new reports surfaced. Motion sensors inside the site had tripped. The initial alerts were small, a few inches of movement, but they kept happening, irregular yet persistent. In some cases, seismic monitors picked up faint tremors that shouldn't have existed in such a geologically stable zone. By the third alert, the readings were strong enough to prompt action. Without explanation, federal agents began clearing the nearby border towns. Evacuation buses rolled in under police escort. Residents were told it was a precautionary measure due to localized seismic instability. But to those living there, it was obvious the fear in the soldiers' eyes said more than any official statement that night. The desert shook. It wasn't much, a low, rolling vibration that rattled windows and caused dogs to bark in unison. But locals swore they felt it coming from below, not across the earth. One man, a former oil rig worker used to reading tremors, claimed the epicenter was right under that damn dig site. Still, government spokespeople dismissed the event as minor and unrelated. Then came the aircraft. A farmer, unable to sleep, sat on his porch smoking a cigarette when he saw it, a matte black transport plane with no visible markings. Rising silently from the direction of the site, it didn't follow the usual flight path toward the nearby base. Instead, it banked sharply, vanishing into the star-choked sky. Within hours, another leak appeared online. Shaky footage from a truck driver parked off a service road. His camera caught soldiers loading a massive crate into the belly of that same aircraft. The crate's dimensions, as internet sleuths were quick to point out, matched the proportions of the mysterious slab. By sunrise, panic began to ripple. Social media filled with theories. Had they removed the slab? Or had something else been? Inside it, officials stuck to their script, recycling the same phrase. There's nothing unusual to report. But the words rang hollow against the backdrop of what the footage showed. Armed men barking orders, floodlights flashing like warning signals. and personnel moving with the frantic efficiency of people trying to get ahead of something they could no longer control. The most haunting moment didn't come from a leak, but from a mistake. A local radio station monitoring open channels out of curiosity caught a stray transmission during a handover between soldiers. The voices were low, urgent. One sounded younger, maybe shaken. "Sir," he said, his tone taut with disbelief, "what if it gets out?" There was a pause. The reply, gruff and final, seemed to cut through the static like a blade. "If it gets out, nothing will be the same." And then silence. The official statements are careful, almost sterile, like someone trying to sweep up shards of glass. Without cutting their hands, border officials talk about ongoing assessments and public safety protocols, while geologists speak in clipped phrases about subsurface anomalies and structural instability. But if you stand back and look at the bigger picture, the pattern is unsettling. A stretch of land that has been open and crossed for decades, centuries, even is now sealed off, guarded, and watched like something might crawl out from under it at any moment. What's strange is how the silence feels louder than the noise. Rumors rush into the empty space left by official explanations. Some locals whisper about an ancient cavern system that might stretch under both nations, carved out by forces older than human memory. Others talk about seismic readings so erratic they look less like natural tremors and more like movement, as in movement from something alive. These are just theories, wild, maybe even ridiculous, but they thrive because the people in charge aren't giving anything better to believe. If it's geology, and it's a mystery even to the experts. Underground shifts like this don't just happen without warning, especially not in areas that have been scanned, drilled, and mapped over the years. Could it be a fault line nobody saw before? Possibly, but fault lines don't usually trigger sudden political lockdowns. Fault lines don't require federal agents in unmarked uniforms, patrolling with equipment no one recognizes. Okay, that's the part the scientists can't or won't explain. The political side is even murkier. A closed border is never just about safety, it's about control. And control, once taken, is rarely given back quickly. This could set a precedent. If a geological event can justify a complete shutdown, what's stopping similar closures elsewhere? Could one unusual reading in the Earth be all it takes to redraw the rules of travel and trade? Some analysts warn this might be less about rocks shifting underground, and more about power shifting above it. Then there's the human question, the moral weight of it all. What if the truth is more extraordinary than dangerous? Something that could unite people across the border rather than divide them? Is it ever right to hide a discovery because it's too disruptive? The official line is that they're protecting the public. But from what? From danger? Or from knowledge? Because history has shown, again and again, that information doesn't just vanish, it seeps out, like water through cracked stone. And when it does, the reaction can't be controlled. Imagine the headlines if it turns out the rumors are true weather. It's a vast hidden ecosystem, the remains of an unknown civilization, or something stranger still. Would the public demand answers, or would fear win, pushing governments to bury it deeper? Right now, the most unnerving thing isn't what we know, it's what we don't. Every day the border stays closed, speculation grows, and every day the Earth under that stretch of land remains unpredictable. The risk of anything breaking through increases. The border remains closed. But the ground beneath is still shifting. The desert lay quiet again, but it was not the same quiet as before. The wind moved slow over the sand, carrying with it a faint metallic Thames, like rain that never came. The fences still stood, their razor wires sagging in places, but the soldiers and the black SUVs were gone. No more floodlights cutting across the dark, no more helicopters shuttering the air, just a wide empty silence that pressed down heavy on the land. Out past the last stretch of road, an old rancher leaned on his fence post. Hat pulled low, eyes narrowed against the sun. He'd been here before all of it started. He'd watched them come in convoys of men in unmarked gear, digging, sealing, burning, and he'd watched them leave without saying a word. But when you asked him what changed, he'd just spit in the dust and say the humming never stopped. Not for a single night. Some swore it was just the wind through the metal posts. Others swore it was deeper, coming from underground, to steady, too, alive to be the earth settling. If you listened long enough, they said, it almost felt like it was listening back, and yet life in town went on. Kids still played in the schoolyard. Trucks still rumbled past the diner at dawn. People avoided talking about it now, not out of fear, but because once you put it into words, you couldn't take it back. The desert keeps its secrets, always has. But this time, something was different. Somewhere beyond those fences, under the dust and rock, something had been found or maybe awakened. The kind of thing that changes everything, even if you can't see it. A year from now. Maybe no one will remember the night the helicopters vanished, or maybe it'll be all anyone talks about. But if the rumors are true, the real story hasn't even begun.